Well, good morning, everybody. Today we welcome Hazel Monae, who brings a decade of experience in the fields of racial equity, education, and community organizing to her new role as Missioner for Equity and Justice at the Episcopal Diocese of Washington. Welcome, Hazel. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here. And this is Teddy, who will be making appearances. So why not?
Oh, that's so cute. Can you start by telling us what exactly is a missioner and how the diocese came to establish this role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to tell a funny joke that when I told my grandmother that I'm a missioner, she said, "Wow, where are you going to go?" You know, that was like her first, like, "What country are you going to visit?" And so I think that it's such an interesting term. Missioner, kind of on a base level, is someone sort of tasked with helping us live into the mission and vision of usually religious spaces. And so it's different than missionary, which is the word I think most people think about. It's specific in religious context, I think, and the strategic plan actually, so some of you might have been around for the strategic plan a couple of years ago with our Bishop Marianne and the staff to sort of think about, like, where do we want to go as a diocese? How do we want to kind of have our North Star? And I know that the Diocese of Washington has always had robust ministries of a variety of types, but sort of really trying to be clear about where we're headed. And so through the strategic plan process, we came sort of with 3 pillars, one of them being around equity and justice specifically. So I was hired in this position in March of this year. So we're moving, I think, into about 7 months. I'm going to get a major in math, so I don't care if I got that right. But and so part of my work is to minister with and advise those who are working around equity and justice throughout the diocese, and then also collaborate with sort of ecumenical, interfaith, and even some civic leaders in our region, which, as you know, is the District of Columbia and 4 counties in Maryland. That's Prince George's County, Charles County, St. Mary's County, and Montgomery County. And they might as well be like different countries, honestly, just in terms of the need and the makeup. And so really nothing cookie cutter in the Missioner for Equity and Justice position, which is really exciting, that as I get a chance to support individuals and congregations, promote equity and justice practices and frameworks, and then help folks do some advocacy work, because we understand that we need to be in partnership with our elected officials to help move some of these issues. And so it's a robust portfolio. I'm so glad to be here still, even about 7 months in, and I'm grateful for all of the connections and the teams that really help support the work. So yeah, that's the missioner, and that's how I came to be.
Oh, wow. And then let's back up just a little. Can you tell us something about yourself and how you came to this ministry?
Yeah, thank you. I'll say, like, as an equity and justice practitioner, it really is important for me to acknowledge the land that we are on that is not our own. And so I'm here on stolen and unceded Piscataway Indigenous territory that is this DMV area. I am a very, melanated descendant of enslaved Africans and of freedom fighters. And I'm a worker for justice and equity. And I sort of, most notably for me, am a relentless follower of Jesus. And so, the intersection of all of those is me. And so bringing kind of this love, this fierce love of Jesus, and the call to really respond to the needs in the world and bring about a time and a kind of a space of thriving for all people is what brought me here. I had, for most of my life, been in pursuit of justice and equity, whether that be for personal or communal reasons. And the work that I was doing prior to this position, I was working in Massachusetts, the Diocese of Massachusetts. And I loved my work and was grateful for what I got to do. And someone shared this job description actually with me, and I first said, oh, I'm good, I'm fine. I was living here actually, but still working in Boston. But it was actually Bishop-elect Paula who said, I had a conversation with her. I had never met her. And she said, I don't know, you need to apply for this position. And I don't know if some of you who have met her know that if she says do something, you just go after it. And I knew that, even having not knowing her. So I am grateful that I said yes. I'm grateful for her push. Because I think in this position, I get a chance to bring a lot of my skill set, a lot of my kind of extrovert, introvert energy into an environment where I get to sort of, use all of them and be in community with folks who are all the way across the spectrum of equity and justice. So it feels really exciting. The last thing I'll say by way of introducing myself as a human person who's not only working, right? I enjoy traveling. For a lot of reasons, the pandemic has been horrendous, but one of them, here's the dog making his space. Because it's my space. One of the biggest, one of the hardest things is not being able to travel. I love to see the world and meet people from all over and try foods and see cultures from all over. So that was really hard. I love traveling. I love spicy food. I'm a Jamaican American. And so I bring a lot of Caribbean energy. My mother is from Alabama, so I bring a lot of Southern sensibilities to how I show up. And I'm a West Coaster. I'm from California. So I have enjoyed being on the East Coast for 10 years, but I miss California. So I will say I'm living on the East Coast with my Californian, Jamaican, Alabama sensibilities. And I'm happy to be here. And if you like word searches and have a cool one, do send them to me because I am obsessed.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that is certainly bringing a lot into the mix here in Washington. And like you said, with the diverse diocese that we have, I mean, that's going to come into play, I can see. Your mid-year message that went out about a month ago references manifesting a lived theology of justice. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. Something that I think about lived theology as a Google Doc versus a Word document. When you make a Word document and you download it and you send it and someone wants to make edits, you've got to like re-download it and change the name to say, this is the updated with the edits and so on and so forth, as opposed to a Google Doc that many of us could be in a Google Doc at the same time. And in real time, what I type, you're going to see. And that's what I think about like living and breathing. It's a comma or a colon instead of a period. And that it requires us in a lot of ways to move away from theory and move into practice, or what a lot of folks call praxis, which is just a fancy way to say practice, honestly. But for me, lived theology is something that takes into consideration not just tradition and doctrine and what's written down in our texts, our religious texts, but takes into consideration our experiences as individuals. And because they are so varied, you can line up 20 women and you're going to have some synergy around like, okay, we have some points of connection as women, but our experiences of being a woman is going to be 20 different experiences. And so Siri is a nosy person. Lived theology takes into consideration the literal lived experience of those who are coming to these theological endeavors, and also takes into consideration the moment, the time that we are living in. It must be as flexible and adaptive as the time that we are in. It must be a Google Doc. And so it's updating all the time. There is some foundations, of course, there are some foundations in our theology, but even those for me are to be engaged and not taken as kind of face value. When I think of lived theology in this moment, in our time, not just, I mean, because we are literally living through some real hellish stuff, if I can say, but just what I see is sort of the convergence of all of these isms that we have not reckoned with very well. We are living in a Kairos moment. And the Kairos is this, we're like, this is the time that sort of Jesus talks about in the Gospels where, you know, Jesus says, be ready. You have no clue when the Son of Humanity will appear. And so we need to be ready. And I think that that's like the question of a lived theology is, are we ready? Not like ready and that's it. I mean, the type of readiness that is ongoing, readying, preparing, which as we know, and we think about our English class, gerund is an ongoing thing. And so lived theology, it asks, you know, has us ask that question, are we readying, are we preparing ourselves for what God is up to? Are we ready to kind of let go of what we thought we knew or what we held as truth? I find it really fascinating that we are in kind of a series of Sundays. We've been in a series of Sundays where like the question has been the same. The gospel is like, are you, you know, like it's better to lose your limbs, it's better to lose your friends, it's better to even lose your life and gain Jesus than to keep all of those things without Jesus, right? Like, are you willing to lose your life for the sake of the liberating gospel? And I think that's the lived theology, because it requires us to do more than just like talk about like, oh, we really want this world where, you know, everyone's thriving. Well, are you willing to stop shopping at Amazon? And that's a question for me. That's not for any, that's a question for me too. Like, am I willing to change where I bank? Am I willing to like learn how to apologize well, how to be in right relationship, how to live a theology? What does it mean to love God, to love neighbor, and to love yourself? What does that look like? I have one of my closest friends, Katie. We became friends in the Episcopal Service Corps program in Boston, and I come from a evangelical tradition. I came to that program from an evangelical church, and the whole time I was like, oh, I just love Jesus. Do you know Jesus? I was like really on this Jesus stuff, and you know, Katie said, so what? Like, so what? What does that even mean? What does that look like? And my response at that time was not lived theology. You know, it was sort of just like, well, you know, we're called to, you know, it was like very kind of like what I had learned in my Baptist schools. And I think for me now, a lived theology, when I say I love Jesus, it's a Verna Dozier loving Jesus. Verna Dozier in her book, Dream of God, says, you know, part of the challenge of Christianity is that we've gotten so good at worshiping Jesus and we have forgotten to follow Jesus. And when I read back through the Gospels and I'm like, okay, let me look and see what it means to follow Jesus, the lived theology, I'm like, wow, like all the judgment I've had about people who look different or have, you know, different lifestyles or whatever, like that's not what it means. Like what I've been doing is not following Jesus. And so our lived theology is to be with people and to be flexible and adaptive in what that looks like. The last thing I will say, and this has been interesting for me as someone who really grew up, like I came to love Jesus in a context where Jesus was this like thing way off there, you know, off in the distance, this, I will meet Jesus in the promised land when I die. And so I don't really have to pay close attention to what's happening here. I just need to get ready for heaven. Like to grow up in that context and now to be, I mean, for me, thank God for a theology that doesn't only leave Jesus like out there, doesn't just leave Jesus up on the cross, but like, and doesn't make Jesus like this mystical son, only a mystical son of God character. The lived theology is a Jesus is a here and now, thinking about Jesus as a human and like, what did Jesus do in his human form? Like challenged the system that ultimately killed him, right? And like challenged us to think about how we practice our values and principles in our own lives. And that's how I want to show up. And that's what I want to bring to this position. And that's how I understand a living, breathing theology. Those were a lot of words. I can talk about lived theology of justice, just what it means to follow Jesus in a real way forever. So we can move forward.
Well, sort of staying on that and understanding that you've only been with us 7 short months, and that you've done some parish visits, but probably not all in the diocese. But can you tell us a little bit about what you see happening, along those lines at the diocese, among the parishes? Are there common themes that are emerging for our area?
Well, certainly. Well, on a diocesan level, there's quite a few ministries and programs. There's the Reparations Task Force, which I know St. John's is a part of. Really, this larger question that we're asking and trying to answer as a diocese of what is the truth that we need to tell around racism? What are sort of those rocks we need to uncover to really get into it? And so we're doing work with revamping sacred ground for individual parishes and providing opportunities for kind of a sacred ground 2.0, or what does sacred ground look like if you're in a multicultural parish, or because sacred ground is as Katrina Brown, the creator of this program, often shares, is that it was built to support predominantly white individuals and congregations, yet we know there's work for all of us to do. And so how do we kind of have a sacred ground conversation that is kind of multi-dimensional? And so really helping congregations do that work. The Reparations Task Force, headed by Peter Jarrett Shell, who's just phenomenal, and doing research on what does it mean to do a reparations, like a history project. What are some best practices? And then having a cohort of about 14 congregations who have decided, yours included, we really want to go deep. We want to do a congregational history project and uncover some of those stones. And so kind of our larger racial equity work is really robust, and all things in between, because we know that racial equity work looks different based on context. A few other things that we're doing diocesan-wide is prison ministry work, to really begin to move into questions that are not just about, well, what kind of Bible verse do we want to bring to the prison visit, which of course is like really essential and important to folks' lives. And we really want to think about, like, how do we get to a place where we're supporting individuals so that they don't even end up in prison? And how do we support folks when they return, and so that we keep that recidivism rate very low, and that there's a lot of resources that the Episcopal Church has to support folks. Many of you also may know about this newly formed Afghan refugee response team that Anne, your amazing leader there, has been just so wonderfully spearheading. And that adjective doesn't even do her justice, but just I've been so excited to see the energy, the wisdom that's pouring out of that group, and the response, for folks to say, like, we have to respond now. And for some people that is just now, and for a lot of people that is signing up for 6 months, a year, and longer, and to support families and individuals. And that's just been beautiful. What that looks like, there's other things around, like, we're getting stuff starting on LGBTQIA competency and humility. A lot of work beginning around, on a diocesan level, beginning around creation care, and we'll move more into that in 2022. What that looks like in the region where you all are is where I'm looking. So this summer, I got a chance to visit every website and talk to as many people as I could from every congregation that we have, 86, to kind of to look at what's happening there. Where are you located, and what are the ministries that you're taking on, and where are their points of synergy? And for me, it's been important to see how many congregations are doing two things. One, around food justice and ministry, which is a lot of opportunity. and the other around sort of racial justice, this beautiful reckoning. And part of the invitation that will come probably in 2022, so be on the lookout, is to join justice networks within our diocese that are built around these ministries and more. And so that might mean that St. John's is like the host of the April Racial Justice Network gathering, sharing best practices. There's action opportunities, there's advocacy opportunities, and there's relationship building, because for me, the work, the longevity of the work is only made possible by the relationships. And so how do we get you all connected to a congregation just as committed to reparations or creation care? Or, I mean, you all do so much. Your ministry list, I had to like make extra tabs to fit your ministry lists. And the community partnerships that you have, are there points of synergy with other congregations that you could build with? Absolutely. And I'm really looking forward to helping orchestrate some of those connections. I'm going to take a swig of water.
Yeah, definitely. That is a lot going on at the diocesan level, and across the parishes, and a lot of work for you catching up on all of that. How best could we support, those initiatives, or support you in all of this great work?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, the beauty of sort of the work. So sometimes I went to a diocesan council and I was like, oh, here's what the diocese is up to. And they're like, wow, you're doing so much. I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I mean, it is true. Like, I'm doing so much, but the reason why there's so much to do is because you all are doing the work. And I get the privilege of accompanying you and supporting and providing resources where I can. And so I think, I mean, this is not so like beautiful and unicorn wrapped up in a bow, but like the work is happening. And I think the what I would encourage is a deepening in the space where you're at. There's tons of work to be done, and there's for many congregations sometimes can be a desire to like add another ministry or add another group that's doing something different. And as you know, like that'll spread the folks too thin and spread the ministries too thin. I think something that would be helpful for you all and for all of our work together is sort of to look at the bandwidth and go deep where you can, and to understand the work as planting seeds, twofold, I'll say. One, planting seeds for the next generation, planting seeds and evidence that we were striving for something that was different than what we saw in front of us. And so we created this, creation care team because we understood that creation care was deeper than recycling. It was, wow, we have really gotten out of touch with land. In fact, we need our land to survive. And so we want to talk about lived theologies of eco-justice. And that is why this team exists. And we planted those seeds, right? So that is really important. The second, sort of the other side, is work yourself out of business. I cannot tell you how, like, I still leap for joy in my spirit. One of the congregations I worked with in Massachusetts, their goal, when they said to me, I said, what is your goal? Like when you think like 10, 15 years down the line with your food pantry, and they had a very robust food ministry program, they said, we don't want to exist. I was like, thank you, Jesus. Like, that's it. And what that means then, in order for these types of things not to exist, we need advocacy, because there are policies that encourage, if not like incite, the type of violence. And I call it violence. Like when people are poor, when people are hungry, when people go without, that is violence against our person, against our spirits. And so that type of violence needs to be eradicated. And so in our country, that requires some elected officials to move their bottoms on some things. And so if we are thinking about the big picture and the long haul and all of those things, what does it look like to work ourselves out of business? And then who are the partners that we need to make that happen? One of the things that I would be so excited, I'm hopeful to offer this in the spring through the School of Christian Faith and Leadership, but a movement ecology from training that helps us understand the importance of different ways to understand justice. So in the structure, it talks about while we are working toward kind of true justice, which is kind of the eradication of all of these ills that we see, we know that they exist. So while we're working to eradicate them, we want to, again, like support folks. So while we're working to end, hunger, people are hungry, so we should feed them, and be in partnership with folks who are finding alternatives for food programs, or and also to be in partnership with those who are doing advocacy or policy work. And so in the spring, we'll be offering an movement ecology course to help folks understand that a little better. But I think that'll be a good place. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, because when I looked at this website and have been in conversation, I'm like, I cannot fit all of the community partners that you all have in one tab on my spreadsheet, which is such a gift. And so an invitation, and it will come and I will call your card on it, is I think you all, and this is so, I want you to hear it, everyone under the sound of my voice, I need you to hear what an inspiration. I mean, truly, what you all have done and what you are up to is just fabulous. And in fact, when, folks say like, oh, the Diocese of Washington is a justice diocese, like I can point to St. John's Norwood and be like, that makes it true. There are other congregations for whom that is true as well, but for you all to hear just how right you make that statement, that we are in pursuit of justice. And so while other congregations are on their journey, some starting and really starting to ask certain questions, I would love for St. John's to kind of be a mentor, if you will, for lack of probably better words, and accompaniment partner to congregations who are asking these questions and trying to figure out, how do we get started? How did you all get to be at the place you are, to have such robust partnerships, to have robust ministries, and doing the deep work? So I'm volunteering you. I am volunteering St. John's to really help us sort of think about, what does this look like on a large scale?
Yeah, no, I am sure that we would be very happy to do that. It's been really interesting for me to watch this whole evolution. I mean, St. John's has been working on a lot of these issues for 20 years, many years. But in the last, 4, 5, 6 years, there's been a real sort of groundswell and momentum building that's really just so exciting. And it's all coming organically. We didn't just sit down and say, what do we want to work on? Somebody would bring a project and start a project, and then people would join that project. And so it all has kind of just, bubbled up. And interestingly, your comment about putting ourselves out of business, that's what we would love. For example, our food distribution program, we started a year ago in the pandemic, and worked with the county and the government and our council member and Health and Human Services, and set up this program. And we had thought initially, we'll just do it till Christmas, and hopefully by then things will be better. And then at Christmas, things are no better. So then, we kept extending 3 months and 3 months. And then, surely at our 1 year anniversary, COVID's going to be over, people are going to be less hungry. And then we could focus on, we were hoping, the hunger rates that existed before the pandemic, which were already not great for our area, right? But we have not seen a drop off yet. And the whole team is working on a transition plan to try to make something more sustainable, because we're working, outside, out of a parking lot, so there's about, 40 people working on a sort of transition plan to keep this in place for as long as it needs to go. And happily, our partners have been all very responsive, the chamber in Bethesda and our government partners. So, there's a way. but we would have hoped to be out of business by now.
I mean, how flexible and adaptive you all have been in such a challenging time. And so kudos to you. And yeah, I think that this plan to sort of see what other ways you could be managing this is really going to be helpful. I would also encourage, like, if there's a need, right? Like it's unfortunate, like how great the need is. And it feels some days to me that it's like growing. I'm like, where'd all these hungry people come from? And it's like, right, we're living in so much precarity. Like, I don't know how people are. Yeah. And so part of it might be that, like, okay, what does it look like for us to continue this? And then we need to like really be talking with our Chamber of Commerce or our local government leaders to sort of think about, like, what are you up to? And, you all are, use those resources. Y'all are white folks. Y'all are in a generally resourced area. I'm just going to call it like it is. You call your elected officials and they're going to listen to you. And I think that that's like what it takes sometimes. Repurpose some funds and really help to move things along. I don't know what's going on in DC, but I live in an area where there's 3 underpasses that are now, they have historically been like tent cities or like housing encampments, and lots of folks are being housed. But that became because a bunch of people who are housed in this area been sleeping in tents and saying, this is unacceptable and you need to get your stuff together. This is what happened when you have privilege of whatever the privilege is. I have housing privilege. And so if I use my privilege and leverage it for the benefit of those who are unhoused, thanks be to God, right? And so that is also the work, like, okay, we were feeding a lot of people. We're using our resources in this way. Let's use our other resources and move our elected officials because you can. Why not?
Yes, no, that is our hope, and we're just starting on a lot of that in the last couple of years, but we'll absolutely continue and seek ways to collaborate with other parishes and get the word out. So I think we should probably, Bill, open for questions. I don't want to dominate this, and then we do have the option of doing a small breakout discussion group, which with a question that Hazel has posed for us. But let's go to some questions first, if folks have.
And I'll just announce everyone has been muted, but you can just unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can type it in the chat. I'll be watching it.
Any questions here? Hey guys, we have a question here. Okay.
Hi, I know that whoops, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I know that several Episcopal churches around the country and dioceses have paid off huge medical debts for people by, when the debts go to collection, you can buy it at a rate of, like, if $5 will pay $500, will buy $500 worth of medical debt. And they've been able to pay off whole communities worth of medical debt. And I was wondering if there has been any discussion in the diocese of repeating what's happened in Atlanta and out in Arizona and New Mexico and Alabama.
Thanks for that question. To my knowledge, that specific question around paying medical debt, that's a surprise to me. I don't think I've heard that. And so thanks for sharing that. And I haven't heard any conversation in my time here in the diocese. One of the spaces where we're focusing of kind of purposing funds is specifically around reparations. So I think that's like the big, like, where the energy is focused. But that's a really good question. And I will bring that to the bishop and our leadership team to sort of think about, like, what are some other ways while we wait to get to that space, because that reparations, like what that number will be coming after some time. But there's something that we can do here and now. I think that's a really helpful thing for us to think about. So thanks for that question, and I'll circle back.
Hazel, maybe I'll ask a question on the topic of reparations, which is, as you know, many of the people in the at St. John's have gone through the Sacred Ground curriculum. I participated in one of the sessions myself. And thinking about reparations and some of the controversies that come up, you know, and I was very interested in what you're saying about lived theology, following Jesus. The word that often comes to mind for me is sacrifice, meaning you have to sacrifice something. But it actually, as I think about it, it maybe isn't a sacrifice. We shouldn't necessarily think of it as sacrifice. We should think of it as trading, right? Trading privilege for beloved community, for example.
Yeah.
And I know in the Sacred Ground curriculum, I was struck, like I'm still trying to figure out, well, what is beloved community? It sounds wonderful, right? But what does it look like, right? And what is it literally? And so I just wonder if you have any comments, you know, as we get into I think when we go beyond the very important work of acknowledging the truth and acknowledging our painful history and wanting to do something, but what is that? I mean, any thoughts on how we should, as a parish or as a diocese, how are we confronting that? How do we make those decisions? Any thoughts in terms of how we follow that path?
Well, thank you for that. Very good question. We'll say, I think historically, like reparations has been defined as like, let's just throw some dollars at these folks that might have been harmed from this thing. And I'm just like flippantly like talking about it, but that's actually how some people talk about it. And the center of reparations is repair. And I think the repair, and then we have access to this great framework through our, presiding bishop, the, becoming beloved community, repairing the breach being one of the kind of pathways. And what that requires, the repair actually requires relationship. I mean, I'm going to sit on that for a long time because I think many of us don't take seriously just how essential that is to all of our lives. And not just relationship to people, but relationship to land, of course. And so when I think of beloved community as it pertains to this conversation around reparations, we won't reach it when the diocese decides a dollar amount or your congregation decides a dollar amount or a program or whatever it will do in terms of reparations. You can give away all your money, and that still won't be, for me, speaking as Hazel, Commissioner, Equity of Justice, it won't be for me reparations in a true sense of actual repaired relationship. Because until that happens, we're not going to actually reach beloved community, because we have seen, all these rich folks who give all their money to charities or give it to give it away. We're still in some strife, right? Even though there's plenty of philanthropic efforts in terms of giving away excess funds. And so to center a relationship, and that means that like, you've got to be okay with like being told about yourself, as my grandmother likes to say. I'm going to tell you about yourself, and I'm going to tell you where you've hurt me. And I'm going to tell you that in order for us to get to a place, you got to stop doing white stuff. That's what my grandmother says. Like, and what that looks like is like relationships built on like guilt and shame and like, oh, I'm feeling so bad at being a privileged white person. It's not going to get you anywhere. But relationships built on like you said, Bill, like, I know that I woke up I came out of the womb and I happen to be a white man. You did not ask for that. Yet the world gave you every benefit of the doubt, every privilege you could ever have. And you're not bad because of that. And I think what all of us, but white folks in particular, just stop feeling bad. Like, it's not doing us any good. And so part of the sacrifice you're talking about is, yes, sometimes like that means like if you have $100 and I have $1, it wouldn't hurt you to give me $10. And that's not going to be that, I think about the woman in the Bible who was going to inherit the kingdom of heaven because she gave by ratio more of what she had than the other person. Y'all remember that story? Y'all good Christians. And so I think about it like that. And it's gonna, like, from a human perspective, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna feel so uncomfortable because for so long, in your DNA, not even just in your however many years you or anyone else has lived, in your DNA, generation after generation, have been told, you the bee's knees, and the sun rose just because it wanted to rise for you. And forget everybody else, right? Like, that's what you've been told, right? And so on a human level, I, as a queer Black woman, who the sun doesn't rise for me, according to the world, but I can understand on a human level what it would feel like if I was told that for generations, it was seeped into my DNA. And then one day, someone who I thought was below me told me that I wasn't all that in a bag of chips. I would feel bad too, right? So I was gonna say that out loud, that it sucks. That's not the right beautiful word, but to like be told, not only are you wrong, but you need to give up what you have because you earned it on the back of me and my people. It's hard to hear that. And the way that we get through that into a place of beloved community, tell the truth and be in right relationship. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see Annalise, that's a pretty name. Annalise has a question. Oh, and you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you for being here. Very informative and interesting. You had mentioned, I think that the diocese is doing prison ministry work. Could you speak more about that? And what is it at the DC jail? Are you working with, different groups or?
Thank you. Yeah, great question. So we have about 10 folks from across the diocese who've come together to form a prison ministry task force that helps all of us think about a few things. One, as I mentioned, sort of like, what are the conditions that people are living in that would, maybe kind of force their hand in the choices that they're making. And so I think about James Baldwin. He says, if I'm hungry, you should be scared. And think about when you're hungry, you personally. People now, it's cute to call it hangry. It's like, you're kind of short with, for me, I'm short with people. I'm like, got an attitude problem. And then I eat and I'm like, wow, I'm just like, I was literally like the Incredible Hulk just a moment ago. And now I'm like a normal person. Think about that generation after generation, systematically. And that when we're talking about, the prison ministry team is talking about like transformative justice. What are the conditions that are putting people in the places where they're making decisions that might lead them to prison? So asking those questions and educating ourselves and congregations around kind of what all of that means, because there are myths that people have about folks who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. And that there's this assumption that every person that went to prison is a murderer. And even if they were, they are a beloved child of God and still deserve our love and support, right? And so really trying to educate folks. And so we're getting ready to do some of that work. And the major part of our work is on reentry, because mainly because 3 of our partnerships are focused on reentry. We have a partnership with the Mayor's Office on Returning Citizens Affairs, the National Network of Returning Citizens, and then Returning Citizens Assistance Network. They're all acronyms that I forget sometimes, but the point of reentry is so essential for a person who's been incarcerated, as many of you know, because come back. And if you don't have a support network, it is very likely that you're going to go back to prison. And the system doesn't make it easy. You can't get a license. No one wants to hire you. You can't. It's like, I have a lot of things to say. It's like, hey, you've done your prison time. Good luck getting your life together, but we won't give you any resources to make it happen. And so the reentry work is extremely important and where we're focusing a lot of our energy right now. If you are interested in joining the team or doing some work around we're getting ready to do a kind of a larger educational piece, please let me know. We would love to have you.
So Lisa, Hazel, I don't see any other questions in the chat. I know we talked about doing breakout rooms and we have only about 15 minutes left. So maybe I'll just pause 1 second. If anyone has another question, you can raise your hand or just speak up. Otherwise, we can go to I think there's a question for the breakout room. So why don't we go ahead and Lisa, did you want to pose the question? How do we want to do the breakout? And
this is Hazel. I think I would like
Hazel.
to, if folks who are on the call or in the congregation, we can just ask the question broadly and pass the mic around. What do you think, Lisa?
Yeah, no, let's do that. I'll put it in the chat right now. And if you want to offer it, read it for folks that in the nave, and then we can just have a discussion.
Right. Thank you. So, this question about what it means to be a beloved community, which kind of can feel jargony sometimes, for me at least. And one of the thought partners I have in my life is Howard Thurman. Many of you might remember him from the Sacred Ground curriculum and other places in your life. Philosopher, civil rights activist and supporter, and just a cool mystic, which is awesome. And he talks about, in his book, The Search for Common Ground, which for me is sort of the sense of beloved community. He talks about, Howard Thurman asserts that this search for common ground requires us to return to God's dream. Now, I can't presume that I know all of God's dream, but we know that it's not this heap of a mess that we're in. So we can at least get that down. So it requires us to return to God's dream. And so for you all at St. John's, like in what area or areas do you all need to return? I know you're doing a lot of work in your congregation, but if you think about, wow, we really are trying to seek beloved community, what is the returning that needs to happen to get to that place? I would love to hear voices or see words in the chat, however you want to respond.
Hazel, maybe I'll just kick us off. I loved your response to my earlier question. It was just wonderful, right? And I'm so thinking about the return. One of the things we've talked about in various forums in the parish is, it's first acknowledging our history. So where have we not been living God's dream? And I don't mean even necessarily. I think that's, we've done some good work. Members of the congregation have done wonderful work in terms of just exploring what our past was. And I think, to me, that's where we've started. And I think it's a great place to start. And I think we've still got work to do to just understand, well, just look back 400 years, where did we go off and how far off are we? And then that can be the beginning of the as we were talking about reparations, right? It can be the beginning of the repair. I think you said it very well. So I think I'm really just repeating.
No, thank you.
But that's what it means to me.
I love what you said. And I sort of, when you said 400, I was like, oh, I would go back like 2,200 years. And, or whenever Christianity was supposedly, is like we're in 2021. So would that be 2000, whatever. I think about the trajectory of Christianity, and this is important for the conversation because we are here in an extremely capitalist, racist, homophobic, all the thing, ableist, you name the isms. For me, because of Christian imperialism. And when I go all the way back, I think about like, how was Christianity created? Who was there? And what context was this sort of birth? And it was like literally like prostitutes and Jews and Muslims and brown people and poor people, all types of folks that we have now thought Christianity is none of that. And then sort of it has traveled, if you think about like trajectory of, it's made its way to Greece and then to somewhere in between, and then it got to the UK and now it's in United States acting a fool, honestly. But along the way, each of those steps, Christianity became closely linked with empire every step of the way until we get to the doctrine of discovery that brought, about what the United States has become. And so I think the return to God's dream or return to right relationship, it requires us to like actually be Christian in a way that isn't doctrinal, you know, or I think the Episcopal Church has some beautiful traditions, which I've grown to enjoy. And Christianity, the Episcopal Church, all of it can do some work with moving away from tradition that is business as usual, and thinking about when Christianity was kind of in an organic community organizer type way, when Christianity was birthed, who was there and what was happening, and how do we return to a non-imperialistic form of Christianity? That's a small task. Let me know how it goes and we'll just follow your lead.
Great.
Any other questions? Yeah, Annalise. Oops, can't see.
Oh, there. Okay, thanks. I was just thinking, how does that look? You know, on a very basic level, does that mean the liturgy changes? Does that mean we broaden the music offerings, so to speak? You know, the more diverse. Do you have ideas about on a very parish by parish level? You know.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I will just say, like, as long as it's authentic, like, change the music however you'd like. I think music is, for me, like, I call music like Insta Jesus. Like, there's something about you just hear the first note of a good hymn or a good, for me, like, gospel song, and I'm just like, yes, I'm gonna be here. And so music really does like have such a powerful effect, and so that could be a place. I think, like, on a church by church level, what it looks like is that word authenticity, because for some churches that has been like changing the liturgy. I have worked with a church that decided that the purity culture of like all white stoles and all the things like just kind of perpetuated like whiteness as purity. And so they wear like lots of colors and they don't wear white as like the main color, and that's like their business. I had worked with a church that did instructed Eucharist in very particular ways that was both like, for those who don't know the Episcopal Church, this is why we do this at this time, but then also brought in like artists and philosophers that were indigenous or that were even local artists to help sort of tell the story about why we have this why we do this at Eucharist. Like, it could be a variety of things, all the way to like partnership with a congregation that partnered with a Kenyan congregation to create a new, like quite literal, like new church. And they have it in Swahili and English. So there's lots of ways you could do it, but as long as it's authentic to like your people that are there and that the relationships are centered, there's nothing like me going to a predominantly white church and they're singing like, you know, a gospel song because they wanted to do like a cool Sunday. And I'm like, but is that authentic to like how you want to show up as a Christian? And it's okay that you don't have like upbeat music. And why don't we use the gifts that you have and the energies that are there in your space? And if you are going to like shift, does it adequately reflect kind of who is there? So there's no cookie cutter way though. So you all will find out about me. There's only a few things that I will say, do this and just do this. Everything else is like, let me get to know what you're up to and who you are, and we can tailor something that is really unique, because it will, like the last thing I'll say is like the reparations work. The reason why I'm so excited about the cohort model is that there's ways that you can share best practices, but at the end of the day, what St. John's Norwood is going to do with your congregational history project is going to be different than a congregation that quite literally had the most enslaved folks per capita. their reparations work is going to look very different than yours. And that's totally fine. It'll be authentic to what you discover. And so too shall your ministries, your liturgies, all of it.
Thank you for that. And can I ask, does it also extend to, you know, we've been talking a lot about how we change sort of internally as a church, but does it also apply to our outward work and following Jesus's ministries and, you know, advocacy and, you know, working to change power outside of the church? Is that part of it in your view?
Oh yeah, to be blunt, to follow Jesus to me has nothing to do with those four walls. Like, it's beautiful. I like going to church, physically going into a building where I felt safe and heard, like literally saved my life and continues to just really speak to me. And I don't need those four walls. And so for me to follow Jesus means you have to get out of that building. Howard Thurman again talks about the inner outer journey. There is the time and the place, the necessity to just come and receive a good word, a neighbor, just like an elbow bump with a person you haven't seen, like whatever it is that you need just to feel like human, to feel seen by God. We all need that and deserve that. And the invitation is to like, let that move you. Something that has always spoken to me is first Episcopal service I went to, I was confused, just so we're all clear. But I went up to take the cracker and everyone got it at the same time. And we were told to say, that, I forget what the priest said, but we were told to say, may we become what we receive. That was 10 years ago. And it has stuck with me because that's the work. Like, this is cute. This is cool that I get to be here and have my like peace moment. And it means nothing for me personally if it does not translate into the world, whether that be, you know, partnerships with your church. Like if you go to work and are a jerk to your, you know, colleague, like what'd you take the Eucharist for if you're going to be a butt right afterward, right? And so like all of it matters, that inner outer work, 100%. And I trust that y'all are doing that work. I mean, I know you are, so very exciting.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Hazel. We are at time and we don't want to keep you on this beautiful Sunday. We thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. And we look forward to working with you going forward. I'm sure there will be lots of opportunities
Thanks so
work
much
together.
Bill. And thanks so much, Bill. This has been great. I'm so happy to see how things unfold. And yeah, we will be connecting for sure. At the very least, because Anne is awesome and I love her and we're going to stay in it. So thank you all so much. And I pray y'all have a wonderful day.
Many thanks. You
Thank you.
too.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Have a great day, everybody.